Number 1. A couple of months ago, my friend's cousin, a single mother, bought a new cell phone. After a long day of work, she came home, placed her phone on the counter, and went to watch TV. Her son came to her and asked if he could play with her new phone. She told him not to call anyone or mess with text messages, and he agreed. At around 11:20, she was drowsy, so she decided to tuck in her son and go to bed. She walked to his room and saw that he wasn't there. She then ran over to her room to find him sleeping on her bed with the phone in his hand. Relieved, she picked her phone back up from his hand to inspect it. Browsing through it, she noticed only minor changes, such as a new background, banner, etc. But then she opened up her saved pictures. She began deleting the pictures he had taken, until only one new picture remained. When she first saw it, she was in disbelief. It was her son sleeping on her bed, but the picture was taken by someone else above him, and it showed the left half of an elderly woman's face. Number 2. One night, when I was maybe 10 or 12 years old, I had trouble falling asleep. My bedroom was the entire top floor of our house, with my bed and such being on the left side, and storage closets and a play area being on the right. I was lying in bed when I heard a noise from the other side of the room, and saw my rocking horse begin to rock. It was sitting just outside one of the storage closet doors. It proceeded to rock its way halfway across the room and stopped dead under the ceiling light. At this point, I was freaking out and just buried my head under my blankets and never peeked out again until the morning. It was all confirmed to not be a dream, as the rocking horse was still in the middle of my room when I woke up. Furthermore, I got a stern reprimand from my parents for being up out of bed playing with my toys well past my bedtime. Their bedroom was directly below the storage closet and play area, and they had heard the creaking of my rocking horse shuffling across the room that night. Number 3. My older sister had a ghost follow her around for years. I lived with her once for about 3 months, and so much weird stuff happened in that time. All my sister would say to me when I mentioned it was that her ghost didn't like me being there. Things like going to bed with everything locked up and switched off, and waking up in the morning with the back door wide open, lights on, and the kettle switched on, were just some of the strange occurrences. One night, my sister and I were getting ready to go out, and I'd asked to borrow her liquid foundation. I used it and put it back where she kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she asked me for it, and it was nowhere to be seen. She accused me of taking it and made me buy her a new one, and refused to listen to my side of the story. About a year or so later, when she was packing up to move to a new house, she found the makeup in a shoebox with some old letters. The shoebox was in a zipped up suitcase that was underneath her bed. But probably the most scared I ever felt was one afternoon when I was the only one in the house, which never happened as 4 other people lived there. I'd arrived home from work and had headed straight to the bathroom. All the doors and windows were closed. I was standing in the bathroom and started squeezing a pimple on my chin when a female voice in the hall said, "Stop picking your zits." It was loud enough and sounded real enough at the time that I thought it was my sister. So I laughed, told her to stop it, and asked what she was doing for dinner. No answer. I stuck my head out into the hall. There was no one there. I searched the house top to bottom, and there was no one home. I sat out on the front porch until someone else got home, because I didn't want to be in there alone. Number 4. This is a story I do not often tell. I promise sincerely that this has scarred me for life, and although I have looked into psychological explanations for what I heard and natural explanations for what had occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother that I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar either, and so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them, when asking my mum. She figured they were just bumps in the night and typical kids' nightmare material. I tried often to explain to her that it was more than that they sounded different from one another, the way people's voices do. On some nights, I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mum's bed with her. It was an added bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom as well. I should add at this point that when walking out into the hall to go to the bathroom, you looked directly down the stairs that would lead you into my living room on the first floor, as my mum's bedroom was on the second floor. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard the phrase, "Look," and to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source, it was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid, and it only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know I was being a good boy? I was so excited, and I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong, masculine voice, different from the first, not at all like my father's. Not to say he isn't masculine, it was just distinctly different. It said, "Stop, right now. Go back up those stairs." I listened, turned around, and what happened next I'm not sure I would believe if someone had told me the same story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we awoke the next morning, the poinsettia lights, little Christmas flower lights that glowed red that my mother had put on the railing down the stairs, were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a forceful tear, laying in a single pile. The dry sink in my living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried we had been the victims of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be any reason as to why this had happened. And then I saw it. And I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid that I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink, which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn, almost as if by a forceful grip. Something down there had grabbed it and had thrown it down. That was what the bang was. I was mortified. After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I don't like to imagine what could have been waiting downstairs for me that night, if it was anything at all. But I can tell you that the reality was that something had physically acted upon 2 things in my house near the bottom of that stairwell. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is sad because in some way I would have liked to have thanked the man or the masculine energy that had stopped me from going down those stairs that night. This all happened when I was 7. I'm 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark, especially shadowy stairwells. Number 5. My grandfather told me this story about how one time he was sitting in a chair in front of the house when he heard his wife repeatedly calling him from inside the house. The thing is, my grandmother passed away a few years before that, but he told me that the voice was so pressing that he actually got up to look inside the house, and as soon as he got inside, he heard a loud crash behind him and turned around to see that the chair he had been sitting in moments ago had been crushed by a cast iron gutter that had fell on it. If he hadn't come inside the house when he did, he would have probably been seriously injured, or worse. I don't know if it's paranormal or not, but every time I think about it, it sends chills down my spine. Number 6. I was babysitting my niece once while I was staying at my brother's place, and they had the baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and started dozing off when I heard some whispering and realised it was coming from the monitor. I initially thought it was some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV, there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I have never been more terrified in my life, but the shadow was clearly there where it had not been before. I ran to my niece's room and looked around, saw nothing, and I took her the hell out of there. I went back to the TV and the shadow was clearly gone. I told my brother what had happened, and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she'd freak out, but that he had seen the same thing several times now, with the same whispering. They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and when my niece was just learning to talk, she would tell her mum about her special friend. To this day, it scares the hell out of me. When they moved out, my brother told me that my niece had become inconsolable and very, very sad because she would miss her friend. Her mum would tell her that she could bring him along, but all she would say was that he couldn't leave the house. We have never to this day told my sister-in-law about that damn shadow. She apparently never saw it. Don't forget to turn out the light.